Oral approach is also known as structural situational approach or method of language teaching. It emerged in Europe and United States somewhere in 1920s and 30s, and the popular names who initiated this approach or method were Harold Palmer and Hornby. They presented language as a network of systematic patterns or linguistic items, which is believed in this method to be learned by the learners in order to encode and decode meaning in a language. And this system of structurally related contents are part of a linguistic system, which is the target of language learning. A few objectives in this method include getting proficiency, which is primarily oral proficiency in the target language. That's why the founders of this method believe that local language or the mother tongue of the learners must be avoided in the target language classroom. It also focuses on vocabulary and grammar control, and it also believes that materials to be introduced, especially the grammatical ones, must be graded from simpler to difficult one for the learners so that they could learn them easily. An interesting component of this method includes that reading and writing are not ignored, like in some other methods where oral proficiency is focused and other skills are compromised. But in this method, though they may not be treated as equally as the spoken or oral proficiency, but they are given due space, at least better space as compared to some other methods. Theoretical assumptions related to this method include that speech is the primary content of the language, and its methodology because of this includes three important principles. The first principle is based on getting the material, or in other words, choosing lexical or grammatical items or content for learning, then organizing that material or content systematically, and then getting that ready for the presentation or developing techniques for the presentation of that material. That is an important job of the instructor in this system. We could see that within this method, language teaching begins with spoken language, then as I said earlier, other skills comes later. Target language is the medium of instruction within the classroom, and new language items are introduced within the teaching situationally, based on the situation or the learning need of the learners. Then vocabulary selection and grammar selection is also made within this method by the teacher. Some common techniques used within the classroom based on this method are dialogues, which are memorized by the learners. Then we have expansion, repetition, substitution drills, then questions and answers drills, and we also have minimal pair completion and grammar games within this method. The role of a teacher is twofold in this method. He might be a kind of model in the presentation stage when he presents learning content to the learners, and then he becomes a conductor later on when he introduces various activities based on this method. This method is quite useful in a way that it focuses on not only on spoken skills, though that is the primary focus in the study, but it also gives space to other skills of learners. And it is also easy to follow because it focuses on language learning in real situations as well. But there are certain disadvantages related to this method as well, because a learner has no control over learning content in this method. He only repeats what teacher says, and he responds to teacher's questions and commands. So his initiative in the learning process is somewhere, to some extent, is curtailed in this method. We also see that this method do not account for the uniqueness of individual sentences. So this method do have its advantages and disadvantages.